Homeostasis, respiratory system in killer whales. In humans, homeostasis happens when the body regulates body temperature in an effort to maintain an internal temperature around 37 degrees. For example, we sweat to cool off during the hot summer days, and we shiver to produce heat during the cold winter season. The respiratory system consists of all structures which are used in the process of breathing and supplying our bodies with oxygen. This is the path that air takes when we breathe it in. Gases are constantly required and produced as a byproduct of cellular and metabolic reactions, so an efficient system for their exchange is extremely important. The mechanisms involved in the respiratory system of a killer whale include the stimulus, which is when the CO2 levels within the blood gets higher. The detector is the chemoreceptor in the lungs, and the processor is when the diaphragm responds by contracting more forcefully and more often. The effector is the nerve impulse to the diaphragm. The response is increase in breathing, and the feedback is that they may need to repeat until the CO2 level is lower. The respiratory system in killer whales helps the whale to take deeper breaths and extract more oxygen from the air they breathe. The whale will exchange a far greater volume of air from its lungs with each breath, 85 to 90%, which is almost completely exchanging the old air from the new air, unlike humans who only renew 10 to 20% of air in the lungs. When a whale exhales, the air comes out of their blowholes between 300 to 500 kilometers per hour. The killer whale, also known as the orca, is one of the most well-known types of whales. They live in organized family groups called pods, which range in size from 10 to 50 whales. Killer whale populations are more concentrated around Iceland and northern Norway, along the northwestern coast of the US and Canada, and the Antarctic and Canadian Arctic. Killer whales tend to live mostly in the frozen areas of the world. Below the water, the whale holds its breath. On its way up to the surface, the whale exhales, then quickly takes a breath as it reaches the surface. If the whale cannot reach the surface because it is covered with ice, it runs out of carbon dioxide and needs to find oxygen quickly. The level of oxygen in blood decreases and the level of carbon dioxide increases. Increasing carbon dioxide levels lead to a stronger and stronger breathing reflex, up to the breath hold breakpoint where the whale can no longer breathe. A continued lack of oxygen in the brain will quickly render the whale unconscious. A lack of oxygen or chemical changes in the lungs may cause the heart to stop beating. This cardiac arrest stops the flow of blood and thus stops the transport of oxygen into the brain. The brain cannot survive long without oxygen, and the continued lack of oxygen in the blood combined with the cardiac arrest will lead to the deterioration of brain cells, causing the first brain damage and eventually brain death, from which recovery is generally considered impossible. The brain will die after approximately 6 minutes without oxygen, but special conditions may prolong this. Adapted advantages. The blowhole. Killer whales have evolved to have a blowhole on the top of their heads through which they can breathe air. In order to open up the blowhole, the killer whale must contract the muscular flap, forcing it to open. These blowholes work in the same way the nostrils of other animals work. The killer whale holds its breath under the water, but when it surfaces to breathe, they can forcefully expel not only the air through the blowhole, but also the mucus and nitrogen as a result of the whale's metabolism, which was stored inside the killer whale while diving. Oxygen is also stored in the whale's body tissues using protein muscles. A whale does not breathe under the air pressure and only inhales when it reaches the surface. Diving. Killer whales need to contain a large amount of oxygen in their system so that they can hold their breath for longer. Killer whales can dive underwater for approximately 100 meters and stay underwater for 3 to 25 minutes. Another adaptation advantage for killer whales is the respiratory gases themselves. Whales need more oxygen to keep their organs supplied for longer periods of time while they're underwater, diving and looking for food. This animal has a more abundant supply of red blood cells and a higher concentration than normal humans, allowing for a larger amount of oxygen to be stored in the blood. To make the most efficient use of their oxygen supply, their blood will flow to the organs that need oxygen the most. They may also be able to slow down their heart rate to reduce the amount of oxygen that their bodies use to keep from sending deoxygenated blood to the lungs, which would raise pressure in the lungs.